we need the good news. Like, we need the beautiful
Absolutely.
stories. We need the positivity.
Yeah.
We also need that real, but it's just like it's a grind to see the sadness all the time.
Content warnings for this episode include racism, mental health, dysphoria, anti-trans bigotry, and misgendering. Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests live and have dwelt upon. Today, we honor the Mohawk, Algonquin, Anishinabewaki.
And I honor the Lenape people.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Miati folks, welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender diverse folks about their special interests.
The name of our show celebrates that gender expansiveness is wonderful.
Hi, I'm Gender Master, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Atlas of Phoenix, and my pronouns are also they, them. The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that this show is hosted by 2 folks who also identify as non-binary, transmasculine, neurodivergent, and disabled, with the passion for telling trans stories.
We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There are no social or medical prerequisites to be included in the community.
All right, welcome to Genderful episode number 98, y'all. Holy wow, we're almost at 100, where we have a very special guest lined up for number 100. We have a less special guest lined up for number 99, so we'll get into that later. This week, our guest, Kah Yangni, they, them pronouns, is chatting with us about their gender journey and their illustration work. So Kah is a illustrator living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or as I call it, Pepe Sylvia. And they have done artwork for all sorts of things, from picture books to billboards to Skittles packages. So welcome to Genderful, Kah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Miranda.
Oh, it's the pleasure is all mine. We were actually chatting in the green room about Philadelphia, which is one of my favorite cities ever. I absolutely adore the place. And you moved there recently, is that right?
Yeah, I moved here like only 4 years ago. 4 years ago, like 2 days ago in 2019.
Awesome. And so what made you decide to move to Philly?
I just was in love with it. Like I was going to school somewhere else and I came here for a job interview and I was like, this is like the coolest city ever. So it like stayed with me that I wanted to live there at some point. And then I got like this really sick 6-week like paid mural internship.
Nice.
And so I came here and I was like, this is so cool. I have to really, really live here. And then eventually like move back.
Awesome.
So,
yeah. No, I've been to Philly probably like 4, 5, 6 times. And I've had a blast every single time. And I love how queer the city is. There's a lot of history in Philadelphia with, as far as, the queer rights movement goes. So, and the progress flag that most people probably know this, but the progress flag is actually from like Philly. So
I just heard that. I didn't even know that until recently. I was in Austin and I was in like this shop called the Little Gay Shop, and they sell like these little prints and they show the flag and they're like, it's the Philadelphia like queer flag. I didn't even know like we're responsible for that. It's so cool. It makes sense to me. I feel like this is like definitely an American headquarters of gayness and transness specifically. It's wild.
Yeah, and there's a lot of American history there. So the city is in love with Benjamin Franklin. Everything is named after Benjamin Franklin for some reason.
Yep. That's, it's true.
Yeah. And the last time I was there, I was checking out the Liberty Bell because every other time I've been to Philly, I just haven't had the chance to look at it. And so I actually did go see the Liberty Bell last time.
Whoa. You did like all the true tourist things.
I did.
You've been everywhere.
yeah, it was nice that everything was kind of like in walking distance. And I'm eventually going to ask you like real questions, but the last thing I want to talk about with Philly is how great the restaurant and food culture is there. So there is one restaurant in particular that I want to shout out. I forget the name of it, but it's a xiao long bao place, or otherwise known as soup dumplings. So it's like I think it's called like Dim Sum Garden, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm writing it down right now.
Oh my God, soup dumplings or xiao long bao is the greatest invention ever created by the human race.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I used to live like in the Boston area, and I first had them there. And so I had my shop that I went to in Boston, but I didn't even know, like, I've been needing to find a Philly one. So you're like,
yeah. So it's in Chinatown. It's incredible. There's so many other places there's so many other great places to eat there. And the market, like the Reading Terminal Market, like is just fantastic.
It's also wild.
Just like it's chock full of top tier delis.
It's so amazing.
Yes.
You're like, I'm so glad you said this, because I feel like I'm like, I still love it. Like, I think it's amazing, but I'm forgetting to go do, like, I feel like you've done some things I haven't done. Like, I haven't been to Reading Terminal in a long time, and I've never done the Liberty Bell. So I'm like, this is the list of things I actually do need to go do.
Yes. Well, I have a very long history with the city of Philadelphia. So. But let's get into our actual interview. So we have a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So the first one is, what might be the things that you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
I have a specific memory of being a middle schooler and just being like, it'd be really cool if I could be a boy. Straight up, plain and simple. It wasn't like a big thought. It was just kind of like a passing thought. And I think there were a couple times I remember reading like I don't know if you know like the Uglies series. There's this writer named Scott, I think Westerfield Feld, and he does like a lot of like cool sci-fi, and he writes like a ton of YA. And one of his book series is about a society in which, like, I think at age, I can't remember the age, but it's like 16 or 18, you get like a pretty surgery where like they completely, like the city will completely make over your look, and you get to move from like where the uglies quote unquote live to the pretty people part of town. But what it got to me is like the main character starts kind of like rebelling against the system, and in the process of doing that, like goes to another city where like they're a lot more like liberal with their surgeries. And so they're telling all the stories of like the wild body mods that people are doing. And I was just like, there's something about that. I was like, that is what I want.
Yeah, that's your jam.
That, like, totally, like the ability to just like do whatever. I think that really stuck with me. Those are the two that, like, I feel like I thought about it a lot more when I was older, but I think that sequence where the person could just like snap, decide that they wanted to be something else and just do it, I think that really drew me. It feels like close.
That's incredibly relatable. And I mean, we're going to get into this later, but I think just having like a lot of like art like that is accessible to younger audiences would really, really like make a big difference in people's lives. So
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how would you say your relationship to gender has evolved over time?
I think I always felt like I was doing being a girl wrong when I was younger. And then around college, I put like a strong effort into doing everything that I thought meant that I was like successful at being a girl, like being on like really intense diets and like spending like hundreds to get like hair weaves and like doing makeup for like 30 minutes a day. Like, it was like really intense period of life. And then I graduated and I fell into like this queer circle of friends, and it was like me and like 3 other friends were planning this like at the time it was called like the Rhode Island Independent Publishers Expo. It's like a comics and like indie writing like festival, and like all of us were queer, but I think one of us was like a trans woman who knew what she was, but 3 of us were like questioning. And we just had so many hours of like planning meetings that kind of devolved into like us just talking about like where we were. And I think we kind of like coached each other through like coming out as like different kinds of non-binary basically.
Mm.
And I just remember that life period like super fondly because I feel like we talked each other out of being cis kind of. And I feel like those are like, it was just such an awesome time of like talking about things and like trying on different outfits and realizing what in our lives didn't work for us and what we wanted to go towards. And I think we all remember that like as a really important time. And I think once I like finished, yeah, but by the time we finished those like really late night conversations about like who we thought that we were, like who we felt that we were, that was more than what we looked like I think everything came out of that. Somebody like um I had like a friend named Victoria Ruiz who's in like this band called Downtown Boys, and she saw like this illustration that I made at the time that was like a Malcolm X quote about like who taught you to hate yourself, and she shouted me out from the stage because she made a song about it and was like, oh, I first got introduced to this quote by Kah, and I want to thank them. Like they just like she just accidentally used they for me, and I was like, whoa, this feels great. I like that. And I just started like going to it ever since then. And yeah, so I've been on that journey and like slowly, I think maybe slower than other trans people around me, like kind of figuring out like what I want to do. Like I didn't really do anything for a while. Then I tried a binder. Then I started like low dose testosterone. Then I stopped. Then I started. I'm like back on again. And it's been like a slow process since then, kind of figuring out like what I actually want to do. That's not just like what I think a trans person has to do. And like still talking to front. It's like so, yeah, it's weird. But yeah, I feel like I'm really like in the middle of it, like still like trying to figure out what I'm doing. And like, but it's like this feels closer than like I feel like when I was trying to be a girl, like people would my friends would say like you have a new haircut every week, you have a new style every week. Like my who I was like very inconsistent because I just like didn't know what I was doing. And I find like the older I get and the more I do this stuff, like the slower the changes are, the more my who I am is stable. So I feel like that means something. Even if I'm changing, like the rate of change is like slower, I feel like getting I'm like getting to where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, and that's absolutely valid. And I think that would probably resonate a lot with folks who identify as non-binary. So, I mean, personally, I don't identify as that, but I can definitely see how some like how that experience can differ from my own because, like, personally, like I saw it's like, oh, being a girl, yes, I want that. I want that and only that. But I can definitely see like or especially early in my journey where it's like, it's like, am I a girl? Am I a dude? I don't know. And where you kind of end up on that journey of self-discovery, you might fall in the middle or you might fall on some other path. So I think it's really important to get those stories out there as well. And it's, if anything, it's there's some like unique difficulties that non-binary folks face because I mean, I can just look at other women and say, okay, well, this is what I'm aspiring to be. This is like, I have my role models. I have people who I want to look like or emulate. But if you're, in the middle, you might not have that, or it might be more difficult to find. Uh, and there
I
was one
totally
thing,
feel that. Yeah.
yeah, and and I want to go back to something else that you mentioned with having, your community of queer folks around you. That's another thing that's extremely important because for those of us who don't have that, it makes the journey so much more difficult. And just being able to talk to other people and listen to other people's stories and recognize yourself and those other people's stories,
Yep,
you
exactly.
get that sense. It's like, oh, I'm not the only one that has these thoughts or these feelings. Like
Yep.
this is part of the human experience, and I need to kind of go through that. So that's something that I know as like a later in life trans person, I wish I had as when I was a younger person. So definitely that would have changed the course of my life. So I'm very glad that you had that community early on.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I think human beings just learn from each other, and I think cis people and straight people, like, they have so many models everywhere they go, and so I think for us, like, we really, if it's possible, like, you really try to get as many examples around you as possible. Because I definitely feel like in moments when I doubted myself and I was like, what am I doing? Like, is this just attention seeking? Like, is this even real? Like, am I a tomboy, etc.? Like, I would talk to other people who were non-binary, and I was just like, I don't, even if I don't know what I am, I know I feel like that person. And I feel like almost every time I meet another NB, I feel like there's something about what they're doing that I can recognize in people a lot of the time, but also can also, like, when they speak, I feel we're similar. So I think that's sometimes when I feel that doubt, I actually think there's aspects to this that remind me of, like, coming out as bi, like, when I was younger, like in an earlier version of queerness, and like feeling that sense of like, is this like, I think being really influenced by like the straight opinions of like, is this just attention seeking? Like, is this real? Or even lesbian and gay opinions of like, is this real? Is this real? And I would like doubt myself sometimes and be like, do you really feel this way? Like, do you actually like women? But then sometimes when I lose faith in myself, I would look at other people and I see like other bi people kind of like operating and moving and loving different people. And I'm like, even if I don't believe in myself, I feel they're real. And I feel like when I get insecure about being like any kind of being trans at all, like I feel like even if I am not sure about myself, like I feel really sure about the people around me. And so I definitely bounce off people around me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that whole feeling of insecurity or that sense of authenticity I mean, that's huge. I mean, um, I would have to assume that every trans person kind of goes through those kind of crises of identity. Cause I mean, personally, I know that like early on, it's like I remember a while ago, like I was maybe like a year into my transition, and like International Women's Day came up, and I was like, do I get to participate in this? Like, am I like had this real sense of like imposter syndrome, and that's something that, as an academic, I'm no stranger to the imposter syndrome, but you definitely you go through these phases of it's like, am I really this? Am I really trans? Am I really this gender? Am I really like part of this community? And I think it takes a long time to really accept yourself. And it's really helpful to have kind of some external validation, but you really need to have that internal validation as well. So I would love to get into our special topic today, which is gender in illustration. So I've been checking out your work, and I love your art style. It's oh my God, it's so colorful, it's so vibrant. And how did you get started working in illustrations?
I'd always how do I do it? I'd always done art. Like I think most artists, you just like are a kid drawing and then you keep doing it. But how I got started as an illustrator was I got this like really awesome, like I had been doing projects, but then I got like this really awesome project for like Trans Day of Resilience in like 2019. And that was like my first bigger thing. And the idea was like to release the project as like this bomb of like oh, I know what I'm saying. Ooh, I got turned around a little bit. Like the project is like a poster and poetry series that gets released on the day of Trans Day of Remembrance as like this burst of light and like resilience and positivity. And I was one of the artists chosen. And I made this poster that says like trans is freedom. And it got released and like it went everywhere. And it was like my first project that like spread all over the country. And I saw it going out even across the world. And I think that was like I think that was one of the first ones that made me feel like illustration can be a job or it is a thing I can do it more. And also it was like
Yeah.
getting the opportunity, and it was like definitely like a tipping point, and I kept getting work after that. And then after like during the COVID thing, got laid off and then just ended up doing it full time. But
Yeah, that's
yeah.
I mean, I love talking to artists because like people who can like draw and illustrate and stuff like that, it's like I can't do it at all. Like I draw like a bright 3-year-old. Like so, uh, whenever I see someone like drawing well, I'm just like, are you like a sorcerer?
Thank you.
So
Well,
I'm always extremely impressed with that. And I mean, I used to think that I like had no artistic inclinations, whatever. I mean, everyone does. It just you have to find your medium that you work with. So I found my medium, but I'm so glad that you found your medium and that you're able to turn that into a career. And it's the world has enough investment bankers and corporate finance experts. We need more people making art and more people making queer art, especially. That's something that the world definitely needs more of. So I'm so glad to be talking to someone who's adding to that. Now, how would you say your art style evolved as you continue to explore your relationship with gender?
um, they kind of go. They definitely go together. Just because I feel like I make art, I make so many. I just feel like when I started working, I realized that there was like really a need for art about trans people in particular. Like that was what I was getting asked to do, but also it's like just obvious that
Mhm.
there needs to be more of it. And it was kind of great because it's like I would say um my security about it or insecurity would go up and down, but like I would do these projects where I have to do like a mural about being trans, or I have to do like another poster or a pin or a sticker, and like that would almost call on me to like channel a moment of like extremely strong beliefs. So it's like I would get in a I would like work on it on days when I was feeling like really in love and really passionate and really strongly about this, and I make a piece and then release it. And I felt like I was almost, by doing like all these jobs that are trans related, like making the art that I needed in a time when I've been like secure and then insecure, insecure and then insecure, or like sad about all the stuff that's happening in the
Mhm.
news. Like I got to like put that energy into making like really bright, intense work and sharing it. And then once it was out there, like I could also use it. Like I've put a lot of those posters up in like my studio and like in my home space. Like I use them too. So I feel like they definitely go together. It's like even if I don't, or I should say like maybe it's not every single day that I feel like trans is freedom, but it's like it reminds me to think that way. I feel like they're almost like visual cues. Like think that way or remember when you felt that way. Like remember the feeling knowing that trans people did exist and they're always going to exist. Like in a
Mhm.
moment when I'm like looking at something and I'm like, are we gonna be okay? Like, is this gonna be okay? Like the work is there. So I feel like it's like I've gotten really lucky to find a way to make art that like it's helping other people, but also like helping me a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
also like a, oh yeah, please go.
No. Please finish your thought, and then I'll I'll chime in with my thoughts.
I also think it's like honestly, if we're gonna do like the neurospicy thing, I think it's like I don't know what the word would be, but like it's also an ADHD thing. I think we
Mm,
take mad notes. We take lots of notes to remember things. And so
mm.
I'm just so used to like journaling and writing stuff down that I need to remember. I have post-its all over the place.
Oh
And so I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like it's a little bit, it's also like it's like that. It's like really similar to the post-its.
Oh yeah.
Like
I
make
mean,
it art.
that's a vibe for sure.
So you
Uh,
feel me.
I've completely lost my train
Yeah.
of thought now.
Oh no. Okay, cool. No, I didn't need to do
I
that.
know.
Uh,
Yeah, speaking of neurospicy, it's like my brain sometimes just like goes into weird directions, and I'm just like, oh, where am I now?
totally. No, yeah, 100%. I think I just did it and I got us off a track.
Oh, I got it back. So yeah, so the whole concept of using art to kind of work through your issues, or art therapy, that sort of thing. It is so powerful, and it's something that like I did not realize the power of that, because like in my art, so like I make videos for most people listening to this realize that, but so I make videos, and I use them as art therapy. So I use those to like kind of work through issues that I think that I've been thinking about, issues that cause me stress or anxiety or whatever, and working through, like, making that art for me has been so helpful for my mental health. And I recommend it to everyone, like whether you're drawing, sculpting, painting, or even just like journaling or anything that like has like this creative outlet for you. Like try it, and you'll see how it can help you. Now, speaking of being neurospicy, how would you say your experience of ADHD intersects with your illustrations?
Hugely. It affects everything. It's responsible for everything. It's literally responsible for everything. Some people are like, "Oh, you do so many art forms," because I've done like I always do different things. Like I do like murals, I do books, I'll do t-shirts, I'll do stickers. Like I'm like really into like the fact that I just do everything, like whatever I want. I'm like about to work on a musical with somebody in a dance musical, like do like the sets and like do like projections for it. I just love that. I'm really excited. I think it's awesome. That like put fire in me. That project is so cool. Because I feel like ADHD is like, we chase that excitement, like the next thing, the thing that's like really fun. And like we also have that like superpower of like the hyper focus. So I feel like everything I have is like a hyper focus that I had at some point. And like my whole practice is like a mishmash of like things I got really interested in. Like there was like that 4 or 5 year chunk of being like obsessed with murals. And then I finally got like my 100-foot mural. I was so excited. And then like billboards became a little bit of a focus and obsession, and I did that. And so, yeah, I feel like everything has been like just chasing that like new thing and like the excitement. And I also even feel like the art style is driven by ADHD, really, because it's like with collages, they can be simpler, they can be complex, and they're like, I don't know how to explain how they go with ADHD. I guess it's like there's something about them that's friendly to the fact that like I think I can only focus in like short bursts. So like the collage thing goes really well. I'm sure there are people with ADHD that are like oil painters doing like work like Da Vinci. I know there are, but for me, I'm just like, this is great. I've developed an art style that like naturally already looks always a little bit unfinished, And so it's really like,
that makes like perfect sense. Like a collage is just a collection of like little tiny like little art pieces that all kind of fit together. So like
totally,
I feel like that is the perfect art form for someone who has ADHD.
I think so too. It works like it's so like I'm so glad somebody asked me, because I think I've secretly in my corner been like, they don't know that it's all this like brain thing. Like
it's like it's interesting because like my neurospiciness manifests a little differently, where I also hyperfocus, but I hyperfocus on one thing for a very long time. So it's like the kind of things that I do, it's like, oh, I'm going to work on this thing for 3 weeks. This one thing. And I literally can't think about anything else.
That's good. That kind of works for film. That's good for things like that like they take a long time.
So like my last like big video project, like it's literally the only thing I could think about for almost a month.
Whoa, you're opposite, Bill. That's kind of you have like it sounds like you're similar, where like your brain is suited to the thing that you chose.
It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like a self-selection thing, where it's like you're successful in the things that you're good at, so you tend to choose to do those things, right? So this is something that I'm fond of telling people who are like, tell me, it's like, why are you so good at everything? It's like, I'm not. I just don't see me doing things that I'm not good at.
Period. Yeah, 100%. Okay, that actually, yes, everything's tracking.
Bad
Okay.
at a lot of things. I just don't let people see me doing them.
That is fair. That is totally not making sense. Totally makes sense. What?
So we do have a question from our chat. So Kamesy says, I can imagine it must also be really affirming to see a demand for art that also satisfies needs that you're filling for yourself.
It is really awesome. It's so validating. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, yeah, because I think top problem of the trans / any marginalized person experience is definitely like the feeling of isolation. Am I weird? Like, what, am I like, is something wrong with me? And I feel like every time I feel alone, like gender wise or politically, like I'm about to feel like I'm weird in some way. But then like to see other people, like they believe so much, like they'll even fund it, like they'll work with me on it, like we're getting a team together around these ideas. Like that's really powerful. It's really validating. It's like, how can I feel insecure if like people are believing so much in this? They will, like, people from all over the world are like sharing it or asking for it. How can I like feel insecure if people are funding, like if people are like willing to give up a wall just to see these words somewhere in Philly? Like that's really cool. Yeah, it helps a lot. It's really cool. It's a niche way to do
100%.
Cool.
I mean, like as always, like the best thing ever is to just have like your own internal validation, but that external validation really helps. I mean, it really helps kickstart that internal validation. So when there's people willing to pay you for your work, and it's like, no, we want you to make this thing for us, that's a pretty good external validation that can really help with the old self-esteem and the old like, oh yeah, I am actually doing the right thing.
Totally. Yeah, that is how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I love having external validation because I struggle with my internal validation. Let's put it that way.
Totally. We need the training wheels, the booster seat. It's helpful.
So we have another question from our chat from Blatant Homosexual. Is it normal to feel as though you're not good enough to be trans?
Oh yeah. What? I just felt this yesterday. Come on. It's hard because it's hard. Although I do want to say, honestly, cis people feel that way too. Because I just felt that way. And I was like, so I guess the answer is yes. I felt like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. So I hit up my brother, my like top ally. He's like a 19-year-old guy living in Houston. He's so cool. And I was like, telling him I felt some insecurity about like stopping and starting tea because I was afraid a little bit of like being potentially perceived as like a threat, like things that guys go through. So I was asking him questions about his experience as like a 6 foot tall Black guy living in Texas,
Right.
And it like sprung into a bigger conversation about like things that he struggles with masculinity. And I was like, what are the parts that you hate the most? And he was like, I hate all the arbitrary rules. Like I can't listen to Summer Walker. I can't listen to R&B, etc. And other guys, and I think he said other guys also being like, that's not manly of you. And I'm just like, these rules are too strict. Those are not conditions under which anybody can feel confident. So it's like, I definitely feel like all the time, literally just, yes, that's why I talk to him. Like, am I trans enough? Am I trans enough? It's like constant. It's easy to feel like insecure when there's like a box that you feel like you have to hit. I think it's normal. I think we all feel
absolutely. Yeah.
I
mean, it's like feeling insecure. That's just part of the human condition. And especially like everything you just said about masculinity is something I very much have personal experience with. So, because I mean, I identified as a dude for, most of my life. So, yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of things to say about masculinity and toxic masculinity and, masculine culture and all that. So that's something that I lived through myself. But to answer our chatter's question, I mean, you are good enough to be trans. No matter who you are good enough. There's no such thing as being trans enough or not being trans enough. And I know that's, especially if you're early on in your transition, you may feel that like you're not trans enough. Be who you are. Be who you want to be, and use whatever labels are comfortable with you, and then don't worry so much about what's good enough or what's trans enough or what's queer enough. Like, just be yourself, and that's all you can be.
That was like the wise answer, but it's true. It's so true. Yeah, you can't. I mean, what all these things are. I feel like a lot of these things are here. They're really like they're guides, but they're not rules. Like, just, I don't know, do you. Like, I don't, there's no way to meet all this stuff 100%.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way to be trans. I mean, it's like, do you identify with the gender other than the one that was assigned to you at birth? Yes. Okay, you're trans. Done.
That's even just now, I was like, oh, that's so comforting to hear.
Yes. That's the literal textbook definition of transgender. It's someone who identifies with a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth. So if you fit that definition, congratulations, you're trans. It's like, I christened thee trans.
Holy, amazing. So true. Oh,
pretty much.
And that's why it's cool to talk to other trans people about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Mirami in chat says that if you think you are, you are. So I remember, like, personally, when I was, questioning my gender, I was watching a YouTube video where it was basically the person said, if you're questioning whether or not you're trans, you probably are. And it literally sent chills down my spine.
Yeah, I don't think I heard that too. I was just like, I don't think cis people walk around asking questions about this thing that they are. Like, what?
They don't. And that was a huge revelation to me. Like, when I identified as cisgender, I assumed that everyone, like, entertained these fantasies of being a gender other than what they were assigned at birth. But it's like, no, that's literally just trans people.
Yeah.
Cisgender they don't think about that. I'm just like, what? What if they don't think about that?
Totally. No, 100%. Other people don't get daydreams of being something else. What?
It's like, I mean, like, because I remember, like, early on in my transition, like, I would ask my guy friends, it's like, so you don't, like, fantasize about being a woman? It's like, no. Like,
so real.
Back to, excuse me. Wow. Oh my God. My voice just decided to crack there. I'm going to hydrate right after asking you this question. So what are your favorite artistic themes or subject matters?
Definitely that gay stuff, that's high up there, obviously. Also, like, anything with music, I'm a big, like, just listen to music. Oh no, I get really emotionally affected by music. I was a musician. I love it. And I think I'm very much in the same space of, like, putting up Post-its and, like, writing everything down, writing reminders down. Like, I also save, like, song lyrics that I think are, like, really sick. And, like, give me a feeling that I feel like I can use into the future. So I think, favorite topics are that gay stuff, being happy, yes, homo propaganda, that's my bag.
The gay
and
agenda.
I also 100%, and music, and people being at peace. I think also doing like the neurospicy thing, I think those visual cues to, like, breathe, chill out, I think anything that gives me that feeling of, like, chill, like, find your chill, like, I think those tend to be the things I like to make art about. I think also, like, I make a lot of, like, Black art, and I think I use it in the same way, where it's like, the world is the world, but I get to like spend time like thinking about us and like putting out more positive images of us, and like also spend my own time focusing on us, and like I don't know. Yeah. So I think that's also big for me. I don't know. Yeah. Those are most of the things. Those are definitely the top interests.
Awesome. No, I love that. And it's I think it's really important to have art or media in general, just showing people just, being happy and living their lives. Like, the struggle, like, the fight for equality and all that is very important, all that, but it can't like we can't define
Totally.
ourselves by our suffering. We have to be able to define ourselves by our
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah. 100%. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like I could go into that could be a whole thing. Yes. Like I feel like I just felt like I don't want my entire life to be about what's hard for us, or my practice to be that either. Like I made like a strong effort maybe a year ago or so to start taking more projects too, where like I felt like it's about just us as ourselves, like not just always like what is hard about being trans, like what is hard about being Black. Like I really want to make more things that are like just self-referential, not about outsiders, peaceful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this kind of dovetails into our next question. Why is it important to amplify queer or trans joy and positivity?
Because we need like, I think we need those reminders of humanity. I remember like when I first did this mural, the biggest mural that I did, that's about like trans people living in this like group home in Philly, and it's um the word like yeah, it's a mural about being trans in part. And I remember I talked to this reporter from NBC News, and they were saying like, oh, this is like the first positive, I think paraphrasing, but they were like, oh, this is like the first positive story I've done in like so long. They're like only do transgender news, or mostly do transgender news. And I was like, that really struck me, because I was like, we need like, we need like, we need the good news. Like we need the beautiful
Absolutely.
stories. We need the positivity.
Yeah.
We also need that real, but it's just like, it's a grind to see the sadness all the time. And like when you see a really positive thing, like the person that I don't know if you saw this piece by someone named Kyrie Snout, who is like,
No.
gender non-conforming people will be everywhere the sun touches. There is no other option. I think that's about what it says. After some politician, I think, said something terrible, it was like a response piece. And I was just like, I need this. Like, I need this reminder. I'm just like, I'm desperate, like everybody else, for like those reminders of like life and like the fight in us and like the positivity. Like, I think that's something that artists can do with like not that many resources. Even like you don't need a huge budget to like make something like that,
No.
that then people will share 20,000 times. I don't know. Like I'm like, then it becomes something that lifts like a lot of us, So yeah, that's why I think it's important.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And just having more and more examples of, people just living their lives and being happy. I mean, it's like when you mentioned that reporter saying it's like, oh, this is the first, positive story I've done in a while. I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, part of that is because there is a lot of like, I mean, if you're going to be someone who covers trans news, then yeah, there
So,
is a lot of it that is negative, that needs to be covered, that needs to be talked about. But it's kind of part of our media culture where like negative news, that's an outrage culture. That's what that's what gets the clicks. That's what gets the engagement. So there's not as much room for the positive stories. And that's kind of an unfortunate reality. But the nice thing is we don't have to adhere to that system. As independent artists, we're able to work outside of that system
break
and make
out.
our own art. And
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah,
And I think we're such a small community that, and maybe like at a certain place in our general civil rights journey, where it's just like the like professional news organizations that have just gotten a hold of this stuff or like starting to cover this stuff, I think they are like a little the negative stories like they need to be told, but they're like getting way too much airtime. And I think I have been I've felt like a little like I feel an awareness within Black life of like a strong effort from people to make like movies and sci-fi books and fantasy and build the world of like art and culture that's like outside of struggle against white supremacy. And like I feel like we need to have that on the trans side too. And so like as many people as can tell a story that doesn't feel fake, but is not completely just everything that's hard, like we need as much as possible.
Absolutely. So we are here with Kah, who is a queer illustrator, and we'll be talking about some of their work. So specifically, we're going to be talking about the book, The Making of Butterflies, which has some beautiful illustrations. You can actually go buy it right now if you want. We'll be posting a link to Kah's Linktree later. But if you have young people in your life, this would be a good book for them. Why don't you tell us about this book and what it was like to illustrate the story?
It is really cool. It's like Sora Hill Hurston's like a really amazing writer, but also in addition to that was like kind of an anthropologist a little, and like she went down to Florida and like would gather stories from people down there. And one of the stories that she recorded is like this like almost like a fairy tale about like how butterflies came to be in the world. And so she kept like a bunch of these stories and put them in a book. Then at some point like Ibram Kendi, who's also like a writer, thinker, academic, like found it and was like, wouldn't it be cool to turn this into like kids books and make it so that kids can also read Zora's work? So then like that's totally the project. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's like beautiful. It's like really nice.
Yeah. And this is like a specifically like African American like folklore that's go through in the book. So and I think that's having children's books that kind of go into like other cultures is or your own culture for African American kids is so fantastic. I mean, I remember being a kid and reading like books about, say, like pre-Columbian South American cultures or, other cultures that like I'm not familiar with, and just getting to learn more about, other people is fantastic especially at a young age. I mean, did you have any sort of experiences like reading like, African American like history or folklore books as a kid?
A little, but not a lot. Like I feel like I grew up on like kind of the more like Western and white stories, aside from the stories like my dad would tell me stories that were like specifically African stories that he brought over, but not, I think a lot of things that are African American history, like because they're suppressed, like me as a like first generation child of immigrants, like I actually didn't get a lot of this. And so I thought it was really cool what this project was like trying to do. And I feel like I I've had to like, I think there's a lot of like African American history that I've had to learn and like read about as an adult. And I feel like you need that stuff to even understand like why this place works the way that it works. And also just it's like, I don't know, it's cool to know what other people are about. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's cool to know what other people are about. Like I'm like I feel like I think the coolest outcome of like the push maybe in the last several years to like have diverse children's books and like other kinds of books is just like these are the stories. There were stories of people around me who were like my friends or like my neighbors that like I didn't know, and I just think it's cool. Like, what if we knew more about each other?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really cool.
And I like that you brought up that, you're a first generation immigrant, because I would have to assume that your experience differs quite a lot from, other African Americans whose families have been here for quite a long time. So do you have any kind of unique perspectives on that?
I feel like it's like, I feel like I notice it most in things like this. Like, to do the research for the book, I read this other, I think to do the research for this book, like I was reading it and realizing like, I feel like I want to know more about the history. Like there's pieces that are missing. I can sense it, but I don't know like what exactly wasn't covered in like high school history classes. So I read this book called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, who's like an amazing writer. And she took like 12 years to write the history of like Black people moving from the South to like the more northern parts of America.
Right.
Which is covers like, I don't know, like the last almost 100 years. And I was reading and I was like, this is like this book is covering stuff that I've seen like my entire life that felt like I never understood it. And I just saw like the way I saw other Black people, I saw how we were, but I felt like I didn't understand because I didn't know the history. And I felt like, I don't even know where I'm going with that. It just really like made me feel like if you're not hearing the history of all the different groups that are here, you're missing like enormous parts of the story. There's so much that's happening today that's really about things that happened like 50 years ago or like 200 years ago. And I think like we just miss it when we're like, there's only a tiny range of stories that are like, that we're allowed to even know.
Yeah, and that's kind of a function of our education system because that's a very narrow focus for our history. So the Great Migration that you kind of alluded to earlier, I mean that was a huge part of the 20th century history that a lot of people just like don't know about. I mean, there was this huge migration of Black folks from the Deep South. This is like right after like civil rights movements and kind of fleeing the Jim Crow laws of the era. And you have this large migration of folks from southern states into northern states, and that's a part of our history. I mean, like being Canadian, I barely learn about American history in general, but even within America, it's not something that's really like taught or people really know about. And even something like the 1921 Tulsa massacre, I needed a TV show to tell me about that. I had no idea.
That's how
I had no idea that was a thing that even happened, and I had no idea that was like not even a unique case. That it was that happened a lot.
100%.
That happened a lot. So Tulsa is just like the most well-known one, but that's was not an isolated incident. So just kind of like learning the parts of history that's people would like us to not know or kind of brush aside is hugely important. And we're actually seeing a bit of that now. So I was actually watching an interview on Democracy Now! About kind of similar things that are going on with trans folks, because there's a huge migration of trans folks fleeing anti-trans states into trans sanctuary states. So it's not exactly the same. I mean, but you can draw a lot of parallels between the two.
No, I definitely feel that. I think it's been interesting in the last, like I would never say the two groups have exactly the same experience, but I definitely was like, oh, I had been more used to knowing that there are Black stories within American history that are deliberately suppressed. And then I think to live in this time of like, well, also actually Black material and art and history is being suppressed too right now, but also living through this time of like queer and trans history, like before our very eyes in America, like being people trying to actually suppress it. I was like, whoa, like we're literally like it's happening over again. Like and I definitely it's been interesting as like a kids book author just to watch it, just because it's impacting like so many people in my field, like even people that I know, and I feel like it's wild to like live through the repeat. I mean, but in some ways it's kind of, I'm glad I know about it from, like, I'm glad I was already aware of it because of knowing about it through Black history. So it helps me like think about like what's happening and see it for the threat that it is. But it's like it's really something.
Yeah, and like it's one of those things, like if you know your history, you can see it like being played out in real time. So it's like a lot of like what was used against Black folks, 50, 60 years ago is what's being used against trans folk these days. They're using the same playbook. So it's, you recognize kind of like the same arguments and the same tactics that they're using.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. I remember having a conversation with one of my friends about, trans athletes. And I was pointing out that like the exact same arguments that people are using against trans women in sports are what they used to use to prevent Black women from from being in sports. So it's like
Slash is even still
changed their
happening a little
playbook.
bit.
Yeah,
no, 100%. It's wild. It's like the more I look at it stuff, I just think there's one playbook. This is how you oppress minorities, and they just like do it.
Yeah, and it's just like whichever one is most politically feasible to go after in the day,
in a particular moment. Yeah, I definitely feel like it's I'm definitely thinking back to like other phases and like who was like the main target within my lifetime, and I just kind of am like, okay, this is like the queer trans moment, and like we have to like get through it with as intact as we can. Like, what have other people done? I've definitely been talking to friends recently and been like, what's happening in other, like, what can we do? Are there lessons in history? Like, what are people doing in other countries? Because we just have to, I'm just like, how can we move through this as okay as possible? What can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have another book that's coming out this fall called Not He or She, I'm Me, which looks wonderful. I was taking a look at the preview. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, that book is so sweet. It's like, okay, total like peaceful, chill. It's written by this person named A.M. Wild. It's like their first book. And it's just like a day in the life of like a little non-binary kid who like lives with a parent and like is totally loved and chilling with their friends and just having like a good day. And it's awesome. It's really sweet. It's really sweet, and it's coming out October 17th.
Awesome. Get your pre-orders in. So if you have a young person in your life that would love this book, or maybe you just like children's literature and you want it for yourself, like pre-order it.
Definitely get it. Get it. Order it.
No, but it's so adorable. I was looking at the kind of like the preview pages and I'm like, oh, this is like something I would have loved to have as a kid. And for any like, like non-binary kids out there that don't realize that they're non-binary, something like this would absolutely change their lives. So
I think so.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is cool, and like the chance to make something that's just like full of love and is like the ideal, like that shows the thing that I know kids who experience. Like, I'm just like, we need more of this. So I was really honored to like be able to collage it up and like make them just words.
Yeah, so I hope the book does really well. I would definitely be recommending it to all my friends who are parents.
Thank you.
Now, do you have any other cool projects in the works?
I'm working on stuff. I'm working on the next book. I just got a message that I really need to send in my drafts. So I'm working on that. But that will be out probably sometime like next year. And yeah, that's like the major thing in my life. That's like I've taken a break from most of their projects so that I can do this thing. But yeah, that when it comes out next year, people will be like, that's what they were talking about. But yeah, that is me right now. Bookland, fully bookland.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that so much. So we're going to get into our concluding questions. So before we get into because we have a couple of questions that we like to ask all of our guests, but before we get into that, is there anything that we missed about gender and illustration that you'd like to make sure that you say?
I guess the only thing I can say is like, I really feel, I guess I already said it, but it's like, I really feel like we're in this moment where I feel so aware, like what each of us does and puts out there really matters. So I would say, like, if you even have like a little bit of drawing talent or ability, like, we need you for real, make something and put it on the internet. Do it like that, because like as much as we can hear from each other in this like really weird time, like the better. As many, and I think more voices is great. Like every time I see like another another trans artist like making something cool, like I feel like you're like helping the psychic health of the whole just by making something, even if it was like really quick, even if it's like a tiny comic or like a little sketch or a poem, like something small, like we really need that. And so yeah, if you feel like the impulse for it and you feel like you're safe to share it, like definitely make and share things. Like
Yeah.
now is like the time.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And that's something that I've been on both sides of. So, like, there's been a lot of trans or queer art that I've really connected with a lot, and it's really helped me quite a lot. And I've had people tell me that stuff that I've made has really helped them. So, like, yeah, if you have art that you want to make, don't worry about it being good. Just make it, just do it and put it out there. You never know who it's going to connect with. So we were talking about a little bit earlier with the whole trans joy. Can you share an experience with us that you've had with gender euphoria?
Um, Honestly, I think being on a dating app and telling someone, I think meeting someone who was really excited to know what my experiences on testosterone
Oh.
have been was really validating. And like just having someone who like wanted to hear like how it's been and if I'm happy and like seem genuinely excited and interested, I was like, oh, I can connect with people. Like I knew that, but I think having my own experience of it, like somebody was like really psyched for me, that was cool.
That's
I don't know.
awesome. I love
That made
that.
me really happy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
That's really cool.
Now, what would you like to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary, trans, and or gender diverse issues?
Well, you know, I'm not an expert. I'm sure that's probably a common answer.
Well, you're an expert
I'm
on
just
your own experience. So.
That's true. Yes, that's my, I felt like my instinct is disclaiming. Yeah, I'm an expert on my own experience. But you know, I'm just a guy, I'm a regular guy. Yeah, I think that is what I want to say. I'm an expert on my own experience. But yeah, but you know you, so talk to some friends. Make some trans friends.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that about wraps up our interview. So Kah Yangni is an illustrator living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They make heartfelt murals, books, and more about justice, queerness, and joy. And their link tree is, you can get the link tree in the chat. And if you're watching this in the future, you can find that in the show notes along with their socials. Here is this week's Clatter query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
What kind of art do you wish there was more of in the world around you?
Awesome. All right, so that wraps up our show. So next week, our guest is, we're going to do Uno reverse, and then next week the guest is going to be me.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So cool.
no, I'm very much looking forward to it. I actually booked myself as a guest before I was asked to be a host on this show. So yeah, so it just kind of like, yeah, it's going to be a good time. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. We're going to talk about, my arts, the kind of the videos that I've been making and kind of my own journey with being trans and all that. So it should be a really good talk. And it's just gonna be our, the two co-hosts just kind of hanging out. So so don't miss that episode. And then episode 100 is going to be Trans Capybara, who is Gender Meowster's spouse. So that's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time. I wish we kind of had the time to record that in person, because I was actually staying at their place for Pride. So yeah, I wish we had the time to actually do like a live podcast recording, but whatever, opportunities miss, it's fine. So thanks again for everyone for tuning in. Thanks to our guest for being here and being so lovely. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. And I've been your host, Miranda, also known as NassAttack. You can catch me at NassAttack on Twitter, on YouTube, and here on Twitch. So until then, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays at twitch.tv/gendermeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited version of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you would like the host to answer or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clatter wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You could take a few moments to also rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Artist credit for Genderful. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by Free Range Megs, aka Soma. The Gender Meowster logo was designed by That's Barnaby and edited with consent by Transgriffin. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and Alexis Vandam. Genderful's social media is managed by Queer to Help. Genderful is hosted by Atlas O Phoenix and Gender Meowster. Genderful is the intellectual property of Gender Meowster. All rights reserved.
Trans rights are human rights. That's right.